Welcome. I'm Tabitha. You're listening to Vinnie's Voice. Episode 1, we're spending some time with Terry McDonald today, Executive Director of St. Vincent de Paul. 50 years, huh, Terry?
Not as the executive director. I've worked here for 50 years. I've only been the director for 39.
Oh, only 39 years. What was St. Vincent de Paul like when you were started here 50 years ago, working for your father, right?
I was working for my father, and it was a very small, traditional, not-for-profit organization, meaning that it had a mission to help low-income people. It was activated by volunteers that would go out and visit people at their homes, and they would bring them resources like food boxes or supplies, beds, and whatever else. And to financially support that, there was a small stores operation that had been developed over the 30 years before that, since the early 50s. And that's what it was. It was an employee base of about 17 people when I started, 3 little stores, and then the volunteers associated with those Catholic parishes that did the volunteer outreach. Of course, after that, things changed pretty dramatically.
How do you mean?
Well, we hit the period of time of the 80s when we went into a serious recession as a community.
Okay.
So the timber industry collapsed. We went from being the major lumber producer for the United States to being a community that lost many of its mills and supports. Unemployment rates ran up to about 20%. People were losing their housing. And it was a bit of a disaster for the community. And it lasted a decade. Organizations like St. Vincent de Paul that did emergency services were simply overrun. And, you couldn't depend on the resources of the community anymore because many of the people that used to give to St. Vincent de Paul simply were in need. And so the question is, what were you going to do about it? And of course, the response typically is, well, it's the government's responsibility, or it's somebody else's responsibility, or else it's God's will, whatever it happens to be. The board and the staff at St. Vincent de Paul took a little different approach. We basically said, well, we're part of this community, and since we're part of this community, we have to take responsibility for what this community needs. That's what our mission is. So the board and the staff at St. Vincent de Paul at that point came up with a plan that said, look, we're going to have to deal with the employment needs of our community because we are losing jobs like crazy. They have to be sustainable and they have to be long-term. We have to develop affordable housing because people were losing their housing. They had to have some place to live. And the last part is that we needed a much more robust emergency services program. So that people that were in need of a food box, people in need of rent assistance, whatever else, that we would have the resources to help them. Well, agreed. We needed all those things.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to get those things? Well, you're going to get those things by coming with capital creation of some sort. Well, where are you going to get that? Well, St. Vincent de Paul knew how to sell things. We had little thrift stores, and I'd worked here for some time. And this is just about the time of my father's death, and the board then appointed me to be the director after him. And during that period of time, I said, well, let's find a way to get more stuff. Let's find a way to get more things that we can bring into this organization to sell or give away. But we can't rely on the traditional just go out and get it from someone's home. We needed to come up with other solutions. So that's when we said, well, let's see if there's anything left at a dump. And that's when we went to the transfer site here in Eugene, and we found that if we put a trailer out there and an attendant, several tons of reusable goods were normally going into the pit that we were able to recover. And we thought, well, if we can go to this dump, maybe we can go to another dump. We talked about going to Portland, and then we went down to the Bay Area. And over the years, we evolved this system of mining basically waste streams around the West Coast and actually around the world.
Do they say necessity is the mother of invention?
I think that desperation leads you to doing many things. And so we kind of hotwired things. And we also decided that since the waste stream was so rich, and that's what we learned, was that the waste stream really had so many things in it, that if we could discipline the waste stream to where we could pull specific products out of the waste stream and find a way to get them reused or rebuilt, that we could create capital. So one of the first things we came up with was, well, let's go ahead and come up with a robust system of fixing appliances. So instead of, putting them out as is or not doing a good repair, we really went into professional repair of appliances. And during that period of the 80s, we moved from producing like 20 or 30 appliances that were rebuilt per month to about 400 per month. To get that, we needed a feedstock, and that came out of the waste stream from transfer sites and dumps in this region, which led us in the 1990s to the development of the CFC recovery program. So during that time, the 90s, remember, the chlorofluorocarbon gases that power refrigerators were banned. That's R12. That gas was banned because it was depleting the ozone layer. As a result of that, we said, oh, somebody's going to have to recycle it. And we set ourselves up as the first EPA-certified recycler reclaimer of freon gas in Oregon, which allowed us to get more product coming in, except for we were being paid to take it, and then we were able to save some of those units to put back out in the marketplace. You can see the theory on this.
Well, and it seems we're providing a service not just the recycling and stewardship, the environmental stewardship. You are producing a product that is typically very expensive for people to buy.
Yes, and decreasing our carbon footprint. Because every time you put an appliance back into use that is actually very functional for a longer period of time, the amount of energy that you would have had to do to replace that and build a new one is dramatically decreased. And in addition to that, we were also cleaning the gas that came out of the refrigerators and returning to factory spec to keep other units that needed that gas because it was not being replaced and built anymore, having that a way for us to then service those products that could continue in their useful life. And we came up with that clean gas for them. And then we looked at beds, looked at mattresses, and we said, if we could get more mattresses to give away to people, that would be a good thing. So transfer sites and dumps, again, there's more product there. Some of them were soiled, and we said, well, let's rebuild those mattresses and box springs, which means take off all the soiled material, put new material on it, and put out a rebuilt product. And we started doing that in the mid-1990s, and that's been a successful program. But of course, what are you going to do with the mattresses that you can't rebuild, or you can't resell, or you can't give away? Well, they would go to the landfill, and so that's when we discovered that, well, we needed to find a way to recycle mattresses. And so in the late 1990s, we worked in combination with the solid waste districts in California to develop DR3, Divert, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, our mattress recycling operations in California, which became the first commercially viable mattress recycling operation in the United States and perhaps the world. And to date, over the last 20-odd years that we've been running that program in Oregon and California, we've processed over 5 million mattresses.
That is amazing, 5 million.
So
I remember you telling me that mattresses are one of the worst items for landfills, too.
Yes, they're very difficult to handle in a landfill. They take a lot of space. They don't compress well.
Oh, the springs. They spring back.
They spring back. That's kind of what they are. They're kind of springy little things. And the result is that landfill operators don't like to have them in a landfill. Likewise, about 85% of a mattress can be recycled. So, the truth is, by creating this continuous loop of reuse, rebuilding, repurposing, and whatever else, we've created a whole system and a way of handling things out of the waste stream, whether it's appliances, or whether it's mattresses, or whether it's household goods, books, shoes, belts, dishes, pots and pans, whatever else, which allows us to process in our various operations about 90 tons of stuff per day, which has led to us being able to build our large stores operation. And that led us also to starting to address the three major issues that we talked about originally that were in the 1990s. We needed to find a way to create jobs and employment. We have been doing that, and these are sustainable jobs. Those jobs are never going away unless you have a COVID-19 outbreak. But during that period of time, it's a little bit different. But basically, we've gone from a staff of 20 in the mid-1980s to a staff now of about 700.
Right.
And those jobs are meaningful. They come with benefits and whatever else. So one of the goals that we had for this community, we feel we've addressed. We also needed to create a robust emergency services system because people are constantly in need. And the homeless issue is a good example of that, where St. Vincent de Paul, which had no homeless programs in the mid-1980s, now runs the majority of homeless service programs for singles and families in the region. And currently, if you would go out someplace tonight, of the people being housed in one housing, one shelter program or another, you would find that St. Vincent de Paul is housing almost 1,000 human beings tonight. It's an amazing transformation. But we're also doing the food boxes and the emergency services and the giving away of stuff that the conferences always did before this. The conferences, meaning the original St. Vincent de Paul volunteers.
Yeah.
None of that's gone away. We've just expanded it.
Yeah. And then added even more layers of social services, not just meeting the need this moment, this night, but helping them over the long term.
Right, and especially with affordable housing, which was the third leg on the stool that we were talking about.
Right.
And since the early 1990s, St. Vincent de Paul has developed about 1,600 units of affordable housing throughout the state of Oregon, including in that 8 mobile home parks, which is a very unique type of housing, but one that we believe is part of the ladder of housing that is necessary to make a healthy community. So whether it was the emergency services, whether it was the housing, or whether it was the jobs, and doing it in a way that was sustainable and environmentally friendly, the waste stream and this creative verve that St. Vincent de Paul has created a unique response to community needs and environmental stewardship.
Absolutely. And to think all of that came out of a crisis in the 1980s that we responded to. You touched on a crisis, one that we're all very familiar with. And I imagine we pivoted there as well. COVID-19, of course, affected the world. How did we respond to that crisis, and what are we doing now?
Well, COVID-19, of course, shut many things down. It actually changed the world, and we continue to see that today. So whether it was the number of homeless or the issues of housing in the community, which have changed very dramatically over the last several years, where the homeless issue has grown and grown and grown, and that you still had to have safety and distancing and whatever else, and you had to have ways to deal with people that were in a completely altered social environment. We had to respond to that, whether it's dusk to dawn or camping programs or the dawn to dawn program or the emergency shelter programs we have, or the motel units that we have, or whether it's the SVdP program for veterans. All of those were programs that needed to be greatly enhanced during the period of COVID-19.
The need was desperate.
It was a needed time when we needed to pivot very quickly, and the fortunate part, again, going back to the basis of St. Vincent de Paul, is that when you have an emergency that requires a quick response, St. Vincent de Paul has that infrastructure to do that. So whether it's the material goods, the staff, or the trucking, or the facilities, St. Vincent de Paul has gathered those resources inside of itself so that we can quickly respond to emergency community needs as needed. And that's what we did during COVID-19. And then we're continuing that effort now as we see the increasingly great disparity between the cost of living and the cost of housing and the income of people is becoming increasingly difficult for people to stay in housing. That's one of the responses that we have now, is to create more housing stock quicker in a very unique way, which is manufacturing the product ourselves.
We have all sorts of exciting things going on.
There's many things that go on.
How much would you say that COVID-19, just like we pivoted and changed dramatically in the 80s, seeing the need there, how has that affected us? I mean, we're only 2 years since the start of COVID-19, so it's hard to see the full picture of how we've pivoted. But how have we changed today over this last 2 years of service?
Well, one thing is that the employment base has changed very dramatically. So, as I said, back in the 1990s or 1980s, when we were in the timber recession, one of the problems that we had during that period of time was there weren't enough jobs, and there were too many people, and so the result was unemployment rates were quite high. People wanted jobs and needed jobs. Today, we are at full employment in this region, and one of the problems we have is how are you going to train the next generation of staff that are going to be coming up? And that finding ways to create meaningful employment, but also trained employees that are going to go on and address the future needs of society, whether they're the bricklayer, or they're the plumber, or the electrician, or the sheetrocker, or whether the truck driver, or whatever else. All are things that have to happen now in creating a better labor force for the future, because those needs are still going to be met. and that we have that broad training base inside of St. Vincent de Paul that can encourage a diverse populations, whether it's homeless singles or whether it's teens and youth, whether it's veterans coming back from deployments, to find ways to get into that employment base and actually be successful in the long term. That's one thing. The other part, another one, of course, is the degree to which the cost of housing has so dramatically changed. So if you went back to before COVID-19 and came to today, you would see that the cost of housing is probably up about 40 to 50%. So the unit that you could have rented for $700, a two-bedroom unit, in 2019 now costs $1,200 in 2022.
Right. And there's not enough.
And there's not enough.
There's just not enough housing. And then add to not just the cost of housing, the cost of living.
And the cost of living.
Every expense has gone up.
And the obvious change in global warming that we have going on, the climate change that we see, with the fires that have come during this period of time, and the drought that we've seen that's been affecting, and the change of species even in our own communities, is driving a lot of change that we are going to see as a society and as a region over the next 20 years.
Right. What new environmental initiatives are there on the horizon? Thinking about how you reacted in the 80s, and it was the beginning of the appliance repair, beginning of the mattresses, the gases. What's on the horizon now?
Well, obviously, better stewardship of resources. So whether that's working with our public agencies, meaning the state and the federal government, to come up with new ways to decrease our carbon footprint, it's very important. Bringing employment back and putting manufacturing back into our communities, and to decrease the travel time that we have on things is very important. I think that stewardship bills like the mattress stewardship bill that was just passed in the last legislative session, which we helped sponsor, is going to help us find a way to create jobs and employment, but also to get those materials that are in mattresses back into a secondary life after this. We anticipate there will be continuing efforts around more stewardship laws going forward, which will not only create jobs and employment, but also be better stewards of the world in which we live. So whether it's the traditional things like glass and bottles and mattresses now, or else prescription drugs or whatever else, we anticipate more of those products will be diverted and taken out of landfill so that we can decrease that carbon footprint. And I think that the next one probably is going to be carpet recycling. Which is done in California and other places around the United States. But we're encouraging that particular stewardship bill. The idea of just peeling the waste stream one layer at a time, finding ways to deal with products out of that waste stream, and then making ourselves more thoughtful as to how you manufacture products, because that's the other part, is if you manufacture a product that can't be recycled in any form, you're not going to help the earth.
No.
But you're going to have to find ways to deal with that. And other places in the world do that very effectively. I think we're going to do it here.
It'd be amazing to get on the other end, to decide when we make something how we're going to deal with it, rather than mattresses. We responded to the mattress.
Right, and finding a way to work with industry to make their products more resilient would be very helpful.
Well, I adore the idea of mining trash. What is the world's trash, and finding value there, repurposing that. But that also provides funding for extensive services. You touched on homelessness. Our emergency and homelessness department has grown tremendously in the last decade, extraordinary compared to the previous 30 years.
That's true. And to some degree, we're hoping we see a plateauing on that. I think some of it is because COVID was such a dramatic shock to the system that many of their vulnerable citizens ended up losing their housing during this period of time. And the stress on service systems were pretty extreme during this period of time. To some degree, we're starting to catch up on some of that, but we must find ways to create new and affordable housing out there a lot quicker than we are right now.
Absolutely. And you have some very exciting news around the affordable housing. You've touched on it. On the new initiatives, what is St. Vincent de Paul doing around affordable housing?
Well, as I said, we've been working on stabilizing affordable housing in mobile home parks for some years. And one of the issues there is that much of the affordable housing stock in these mobile home parks is very old. So pre-76 mobile homes are built to virtually no standard, and we still have about 40,000 of those units in active use in the state of Oregon alone. and these units are going out of service on a regular basis. Well, couple that with the wildfires that we've had in rural parts of Oregon or on southern Oregon, around Talent and Phoenix, where thousands of units were lost. And you come up with a need right now to find a way to replace that housing stock cost effectively and quickly as possible. Well, that would require going back to the industry that manufactures mobile homes, because that's what people want to do. They want to have those mobile homes again. They're affordable housing. And the industry simply can't respond. They are at full capacity and are manufacturing products for higher markets most of the time than affordable housing. And the result is that there's this gap in what is affordable versus what is being manufactured in an industry that's basically at full capacity.
Yeah. Thinking of Ashland, we're at almost 2 years out, and they've not been able to get manufactured homes into their community to replace the ones
There's been
lost.
some, but very, very few. And how are we going to get that to be affordable? So St. Vincent de Paul and other members of the community in the Housing Alliance across the state came up with a suggestion to the last legislature session that said, what we need to do is we need to create, under the auspices of a not-for-profit organization, a mobile home manufacturing facility somewhere in the state of Oregon that can help address this need. And its goal would be to create a single-wide product and a double-wide product that would be appropriate for families, that would be extremely energy efficient, because we do want to make sure that we keep our carbon footprint down, that would be resilient and fire resistant, so that we don't end up having it being a problem in terms of wildfires again. But it also has to be very affordable. And the legislature funded that activity to be stewarded by St. Vincent de Paul to create that facility in Eugene, so that we will be able to create a single-wide and a double-wide product started in 2023 that will be affordable for low-income people, that will be appropriate for their housing stock in many parts of the state, and should be able to put out around 4 units per day. It will create long-term, permanent, very good-paying jobs, but also be a training area for people that are coming out of whatever programs, be it homeless services or high school apprentice programs, or also out of veteran services programs that will feed into that to create a more stable community across the board.
This is a very unique setup, the idea of a nonprofit.
It's unique. It's never happened before. Again, as with many other things, we're kind of jumping out there.
Yes, but it's all in response to the community need, which I think is so valuable. In the 35 years you've been a director, I mean, you've seen us respond and been at the head of us pivoting, sometimes yearly, sometimes daily, especially in COVID. Whatever that community need is, we've striven to meet that need.
Well, and the other part on that one is that we've also tried to make sure that we helped other groups.
Right.
So, St. Vincent de Paul is not the universe. We are a piece of the community. We are not the community. We'd like to reflect the community's values, but we are not the community. And there are many other groups that work in tandem with us in a variety of issues. So, for example, in the facility that we're setting up for manufacturing mobile homes, we're taking a portion of that building and making it available for another nonprofit to build tiny homes. We're trying to develop rural housing on a new manufacturing process that would be open frame construction instead of closed frame construction. And I will not get into the details, just trust you, it's a unique idea. But we're also trying to encourage other nonprofits and groups out there to address community needs that we would not typically do. So, again, St. Vincent de Paul should be, and I believe can be, a catalyst for changing community, but it does not have to always be about St. Vincent de Paul. It's about the community as a whole.
Yeah.
So whether it's us helping a food box agency up in Oak Ridge find a way to find a permanent home, or whether it's working with the Dalles and finding a way to create a safe place for homeless individuals to receive services by helping them with a fence and getting some developments, or whether it's sponsoring a not-for-profit to start serving an area that would not be traditionally in St. Vincent de Paul's wheelhouse, is a way for us, St. Vincent de Paul, not to be as much of a funder or a grant giver, but as a partner to serve as a catalyst to encourage other organizations to move forward. And that's what the McDonald Community Values Fund is really for.
Okay, so it's the McDonald Community Vision Fund is about the community.
Yes.
At St. Vincent de Paul helping and supporting, coming alongside, but ultimately it's going to be community efforts that fund is supporting.
Right, right.
It really seems like a great topper to the legacy of that full spectrum that you've gone through to have created now, hopefully, a funding source for others to do what St. Vinny's has done.
Right, and ways for us to really multiply our efforts as a community. So if you have a program base that just needs a nudge to make it go forward, why not service that nudge? And if St. Vincent de Paul can offer other services like facilities or trucking or whatever else, all those things combined can move us along the path towards sustainability much quicker.
Absolutely. Well, the idea of working together, it's not just us against
It's
the
not
world.
about us. It's not about us. It's about the community as a whole.
Absolutely.
It's about the we.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing about nonprofits, is it's about who we serve.
I hope so. That's what we've done all these years.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to talk us through that, to hear that sequentially, know that basically how we've started, we have continued to do that. And here we are now, stronger than ever, ready to go into this next season with even new and more beautiful initiatives to help even more people.
And that is the goal. And with the community support, with the support of those out there who have given us support all these many years and would do so, and I hope will do in the future, we can indeed build a just, stable, and sustainable community based upon the values we all share.
Thank you, Terry. We could not have said it better.
For more information about the McDonald Community Vision Fund, or for more information about emergency and supportive services, affordable housing, and environmental stewardship initiatives, please visit svdp.us or call 541-687-5820.